When writing about oneself, one should show no mercy. I will keep this diary for 1 year, 12 months. And at the end of that time, it will be destroyed, shredded, then burnt. The experiment will be over.
Paul Schrader's First Reformed is a rare movie that deeply captures a cultural subcurrent that can't be fully articulated with words alone. It's a brilliant and bleak masterpiece that touches on both the eternal and the particulars of the current moment. It's a portrait of true despair and the devastating loneliness of men in the modern world. For all the ink that's been spilled about this subject, nothing has communicated what the actual experience is like for so many men out there, and this is why First Reformed is such a powerful film. It isn't a statement or a sermon that is trying to moralize or explain the causes and effects of this phenomenon. Instead, it's a portal into the experience of what despair feels like when you are trapped in its depths. This is a picture of the heart of a man who could be your neighbor, your coworker, your husband, or your son. The cinematography is claustrophobic. The world is gray and lifeless. There's barely a score or soundtrack, and the camera rarely even moves. There is not a frame in this movie that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. First Reformed takes us into the mind of Ernst Toller, a man whose life has been touched by tremendous tragedy. The death of his son in the Iraq War broke his marriage and sent him on a path of terminal alcoholism. But this is not simply a story of a man dealing with grief. It's a portrait of someone who has allowed his own suffering to metastasize and grow into an all-encompassing despair.
Can you imagine that? In the dark, the air hot, shaking with fear, the sound of the slave hunters' horses outside, on their knees, holding each other's hands, praying for God to save them.
Toller is not agonizing over the collapse of his former life or lamenting his regrets. He's sunken so far and so comfortably into his own personal darkness that it is the only thing he can see. Toller's despair, however, is not exciting, dramatic, or cinematic. The routine of his life is not interrupted by emotional breakdowns or dramatic crises. He lives his life, preaches his sermons, attends to his mundane affairs in a sequestered tourist trap of a church, gray day after dreary gray day. The quiet of his isolation is broken only when one of his congregants, a young pregnant woman named Mary, asks the Reverend to speak to her husband, who is in a state of crisis. Toller visits them at their home and finds something he didn't anticipate. Mary's husband, Michael, is not simply depressed because he's out of work or drinking a 12-pack every night to drown mundane sorrows. He's like Ernst. He is a man in a pit of despair who can see no way out. This fascinates Toller and sets the stage for the rest of the movie.
Next lifetime, huh?
I felt like I was Jacob wrestling all night long with the angel, fighting in the grasp. Every sentence, every question, every response a mortal struggle. It was exhilarating.
Toller spends the rest of this scene wrestling with Michael's despair, using this man as a means to grapple with his own darkness. The thrill of trading blows with scripture, logic, and wisdom is exhilarating to him. And while everything he says to Michael is essentially true, you understand that Ernst cannot apply any of this wisdom to his own life. They're simply words. They can't penetrate the wall of fog between the world and Ernst's heart. And this is one of the more brilliant aspects of this movie. Men who are trapped by this kind of despair cannot simply be talked out of it. You can touch grass, lift weights, go to church, and clean your room, all of which are good things to do. But there isn't a word cell checklist that can save someone. It requires something else. And Ernst knows that it isn't enough for him. He spends his night writing about his experience with Michael and shutting himself back into his personal prison. When next we see Mary, she reveals to Toller that her husband's terminal environmentalist activism may be taking a terroristic turn. But Ernst doesn't get rid of the bomb. For all of his concerned words, he keeps it. After Michael discovers he's been found out, he kills himself, leaving Toller to find his corpse. This suicide hangs over everything in the rest of the film. As Ernst is tasked with helping Mary settle her affairs and preside over Michael's funeral, his health declines rapidly in tandem with his mental state. His meditations grow darker and he becomes fixated with the suicide vest that he took from Michael. The vest flips a switch in Toller's mind, offering an outlet for his suffering. This darkness that has coiled inside him for so long is reaching a point where it will soon snap. The bomb has created a crack in the dam of his soul. He can barely contain his interactions with other people in his life, showing his true self in moments of desperation. But in the face of all of this, his despair keeps being interrupted by the face of a young woman. Despite Toller's over-intellectualized and self-imposed torment, Mary, oblivious to what's going on in his inner life, almost as if by accident, manages to do the impossible. She makes a genuine human connection with Ernst. And this connection is made in a pivotal scene in the movie where the stark cinematography and static life of Ernst Toller is shifted into a hyper-reality where we see this connection happen. The dreaminess of this levitation sequence is key. The colors are saturated, the scenery is beautiful, and they are literally flying over the landscape of Ernst's soul. But not even this moment of humanity can escape the poison inside Toller. The scene shifts to environmental wastelands. It's a clear visualization of his dark thoughts returning, even in a moment of sincerity. Paul Schrader, the writer and director, absolutely believes in environmentalism as a political cause, and sees the world headed toward ecological disaster when his life is over. But the imagery here is not really a political statement. It's like Ernst says to Michael,
Look, this is it's not about your baby. It's not about Mary. It's about you and your despair, your lack of hope.
Ernst's seemingly growing obsession with environmentalism is not a sincere devotion to a political cause. It's a rationalization for his desire to spill his darkness out of himself and onto others. His religious musings on the subject of killing those who destroy the earth are not a demonstration of, quote, radicalization. They are a rationalization of his own despair. As the public reconsecration of his church approaches, he is consumed by the desire for release. He wants to end his misery and assert his agency in the only way he believes he can. The bomb is his only avenue out of the gray. It is his only way to punish the world that he hates so thoroughly. But in the final moments before he can execute his plan, he sees Mary arrive at the church. The only connection to the world that he has arrived out of the simple desire to support him. And this sends him into a harrowing experience of true torment. The cold rationality that he has displayed through the entire film is gone, and he lashes out, animalistically, torturing himself in a frenzy. Being robbed of his final exit, he pours himself a glass of Drano and tries to raise it to his lips. But in the final moments of this frenzied nightmare, he is saved. When I first saw this movie, I absolutely hated it. I didn't hate it because I thought it was poorly made or made no sense. I hated it because I was at a point in my life where I was on the verge of despair myself. And the degree to which First Reformed makes the viewer experience Toller's loneliness is something that few films have ever managed to do. I hated it not because it was bad, but because it was true. But I wasn't able to get the movie out of my head, and about a week later, I realized that First Reformed was actually a masterpiece. The final scene of this movie has been the subject of a lot of debate, and Schrader himself has claimed that he left the ending deliberately ambiguous. But something that you need to understand about watching movies is that it doesn't matter what the creator says about it. What matters is on the screen. Midwits will tell you that at the end of the movie, Toller drank the Drano. What you see at the end is not a man letting go of his suffering and despair, but instead, it's the final firings of the synapses of a dying man. It's all in his head, and he's actually violently puking blood down on his hands and knees. They'll tell you this because the final moments of the movie have entered that hyper-reality that we witnessed earlier during the levitation scene. They'll tell you this because the camera, which has been static for the entire movie, now gracefully flows around the two characters. And they'll tell you this because Mary somehow walked through a locked door. To the midwit, the hyper-real and the heightening of reality somehow doesn't mean that what you're witnessing is more real than everything else, as those words would actually lead you to believe. It instead somehow means that everything is actually fake. These are the thoughts of a high school English teacher, not a human being. The truth of the matter is, for those of us with souls, is that when a movie like this breaks from its convention of static cameras, bleak grays, and utter darkness into a hyper-stylized visual language that isn't present in the rest of the movie, it's because this is the most important thing in the film. These two scenes, the levitation and the exaltation, are the entire point and key of this movie. What you see really is what you get. The magic in these scenes is literal, though not in the sense that a Redditor would use the term. Toller pours himself a tall glass of poison and is then confronted with the most primal image of hope that a man can conceive of, a beautiful young woman carrying a child. In this singular moment, Toller chooses life. He lets go of his poison. He exits the garden. Toller's scene of torment is his true crisis of faith, his true dark night of the soul, and his true rock bottom. Until now, he's been incapable of even making the choice between life and death. It is the crisis and the miracle that allows him to let go of his despair. And this isn't a blueprint for how men can get out of their despair. This isn't a message movie, because it doesn't need to be. This is a film that's meant to be experienced. And this is what makes it so great and so hopeful. The depths to which you experience Ernst's loneliness can't be conveyed in words, and the relief of his choice to live washes all of that away in one long kiss. First Reformed doesn't supply a solution to despair and loneliness, but it does provide the answer. Anyone who's been near the bottom like Ernst Toller knows that the only way out is to put down the poison. What that means in any individual life will be different for everyone, but the experience is universal and transcendent. The male loneliness epidemic has been discussed to death, but the mountains of statistics about this phenomenon cannot do what this movie does, which is to make you feel something. To be alone is to walk through hell, and the truth of despair is that you think no one else on earth knows what it's like to be where you are. This is the lie of despair and the trap that keeps you at the bottom. And this is why Toller's salvation in the movie's final moment is so true and obvious, yet it defies easy explanation. What Ernst has in that final moment is hope, and hope is something that can't be conveyed through words alone. It isn't simply wishful thinking, it is the transcendent. It can't be communicated with a monologue or from the pulpit. It's something that must simply be experienced. I don't know what it will take for you, but you can put down the poison.